Space is stupidly expensive, but maybe it's not. Going to space is like setting your money on fire, but with extra steps. NASA once paid $2,100 for a single bolt. A spacesuit? $12 million. And no, you don't even get to keep it. We spend billions on rockets, and half the time they just explode on live TV. But here's the twist. Maybe it is worth it. Because when you're trying to launch humans off the planet, survive minus 270 degrees Celsius, dodge micrometeorites, and not die in a floating coffin, that $2.5 billion price tag starts to make slightly more sense. We're talking tens of billions for missions, satellites, rockets, and that's just the stuff we hear about. But what actually makes it so expensive? Is it crazy technology, government red tape, or are we just paying for Elon Musk's Twitter flex? In this video, we're digging into the real reasons from NASA's multi-billion-dollar launches to how SpaceX can do it for a fraction of the price. We'll talk about the tech, the politics, the egos, and yes, even the profit. Because here's the twist. Space is insanely expensive, but the real reason it costs so much might not have anything to do with space at all. What actually makes space so expensive? Let's start with research and development. Engineers spend years designing, testing, and improving systems to make sure they work perfectly, because if they don't, people die. Then there's the launch infrastructure. That includes launch pads, tracking systems, massive fuel storage tanks, and the high security facilities needed to prep and protect every mission. These are giant, custom-built setups, and they cost hundreds of millions to create and maintain. Next, the materials. You can't build a spacecraft with regular steel or aluminium. You need ultra-light, ultra-strong metals and cryogenic fuels that stay stable at minus 200 degrees Celsius. These materials aren't just rare, they're stupidly expensive. Now throw in testing and safety checks. Every screw, circuit, and button get tested, retested, and tested again. A single failure could mean a $1 billion explosion, or worse, human lives lost. In 2010, NASA spent $349 million on a rocket that never even launched. That's not a joke, that's real. So yeah, launching into space isn't just about going up, it's about everything it takes to make sure you come back down. In one piece, NASA versus SpaceX. Why private companies spend less. NASA spends billions while SpaceX does the same thing for millions. SpaceX can launch a Falcon 9 rocket for around $67 million. Meanwhile, NASA's SLS rocket, the Space Launch System, costs about $4.1 billion per launch. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between buying a house and buying an entire country. First, vertical integration. SpaceX builds most of its parts in-house. That means fewer middlemen, less markup, and total control over the process. NASA, on the other hand, contracts hundreds of companies, each with their own timelines, delays, and price tags. Second, reusability. Falcon 9 boosters don't get thrown away after one launch. They land, get cleaned up, and fly again like a giant space Uber. NASA's rockets? One and done. Use it once, then scrap it. It's like buying a brand new car and driving it straight into a wall. Third, speed. SpaceX can test, fail, and launch again in months. NASA, layers of bureaucracy, paperwork, and politics. As people like to joke, NASA spends millions just getting permission to spend millions. Elon Musk once tweeted that a $700,000 valve delayed an entire mission. That's how fragile the process is. But to be fair, NASA and SpaceX have different goals. NASA does deep space science, long-term missions, and risk-heavy exploration. SpaceX is focused on efficiency, innovation, and let's be honest, getting to Mars before they're regulated. Still, that $4 billion versus $67 million gap, kind of hard to ignore. The bureaucratic mess, government spending, and paperwork. When you're NASA, you don't just decide to build a rocket and launch it, You go through layers of approvals, audits, risk assessments, and political funding reviews, all before a single bolt is ordered. Every decision is double-checked, signed off, and sometimes debated for years. Why? Because it's taxpayer money, and no one wants to be blamed for a multi-billion-dollar mistake, even if it means slowing everything down. Then there are cost-plus contracts, a setup where the more the project costs, the more contractors get paid. So there's zero incentives to be cheap or fast. In fact, delays and overruns often mean more money for the people building the hardware. Here's a real stat. Over 80% of NASA's budget goes to outside contractors. Most of the money never even touches NASA's hands. Well, now imagine trying to build a rocket while 12 different government agencies argue over which form you forgot to sign. That's the reality. Space is hard. Government space is harder. Here's the harsh truth. Space does not forgive mistakes. One small error, even just 1% off, can turn into a total disaster, and we've seen it happen. In 1986, the Challenger space shuttle exploded just 73 seconds after takeoff. A small rubber seal called an O-ring failed in cold weather. It cost 7 lives. Then, in 2003, the Columbia shuttle broke apart during re-entry. A piece of foam broke off during launch and damaged a wing. Again, 7 astronauts died. In both cases, there were warnings, but budget cuts, launch pressure, and bureaucracy got in the way. The price? Human lives. That's why space missions are filled with layers of redundancy. Everything has a backup, and often a backup for the backup. If one system fails, another kicks in, and all of that costs money. Even the toilet on the International Space Station costs $23 million because it has to work in zero gravity without spilling anything. Every screw, wire, and sensor on a spacecraft must survive extreme temperatures, radiation, and the vacuum of space. You can't just fix it if something breaks. There's no AAA in orbit. You don't get second chances in space, just debris. When lives are on the line, cheap isn't an option. Why billionaires are obsessed with space? Guys like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson have turned space into their personal playground. We've seen the headlines. Rockets blasting into the sky just to float in zero gravity for a few minutes, champagne corks popping mid-orbit, celebrities taking selfies in spacesuits. To many people, it all feels like a rich man's PR stunt like flexing, but with rockets. But if you look deeper, there's more going on than just ego. Elon Musk wants to colonize Mars. Seriously, his entire SpaceX mission is built around making humanity a multi-planetary species, starting with reusable rockets and ending with Martian cities. Jeff Bezos talks about building space factories and habitats, moving heavy industry off Earth to preserve our planet. His company, Blue Origin, is focused on long-term space infrastructure. And then there's satellite internet, like Musk's Starlink. Thousands of satellites already in orbit providing global internet access. That's not just a moneymaker, it's a game changer. So yeah, billionaires burn billions on space. But here's the twist. It might actually pay off. Are they wasting money on joyrides or laying the groundwork for humanity's next chapter? Maybe both. Either way, they're pushing tech, lowering launch costs, and making space more accessible, even if they look ridiculous doing it. Is space worth the price tag? Let's look at what space spending has already given us. Spoiler, it's not just moon rocks and rocket fuel. Thanks to satellites, we have GPS, the thing that gets you to the nearest coffee shop or helps planes land in storms. Weather forecasting, also space tech. Without it, we'd still be guessing the weather by looking at clouds. Satellite communication, that's how we get the internet in rural areas, stream live events, and talk to astronauts from Earth. Even things like memory foam, infrared thermometers, and clean water filters came from space research. So yeah, we didn't just send astronauts to space. We brought real innovation back down to Earth. But here's the moral tension. Should we be fixing Earth first, solving poverty, climate change, healthcare, or building a backup plan on Mars? It's not an easy answer, but here's something to think about. When the Wright brothers built the first airplane, people said it was pointless. Now, we fly across the world in hours. When the internet first arrived, it was slow, expensive, and confusing. Now we literally depend on it every day. Space is expensive now, but so was electricity once. What seems like a waste today might become essential tomorrow. So, is space worth it? Maybe the better question is, can we afford to ignore it? The real reason space costs so much. So, after everything rockets, billionaires, toilets that cost more than cars, what's the real reason space is so expensive? It's not just about high-tech parts or rare metals, it's about politics, risk, and fear. NASA isn't slow because it's stupid. It's slow because failure costs lives and headlines. One wrong move, and it's not just money lost. It's careers, public trust, and sometimes human lives. That's why government agencies are so cautious. They build slowly, test everything, and make absolutely sure it works before launch, even if it takes years. Meanwhile, private companies like SpaceX can take risks. They're allowed to fail fast, blow up rockets, learn quickly, and keep going. That freedom saves money and, ironically, speeds things up. But here's the contradiction. We don't overpay because we can't do it cheaper. We overpay because we're terrified of what happens if we don't do it right. In space, the margin for error is razor thin. So instead of risking failure, we often throw more money at the problem. Not always the smartest way, but sometimes the safest. And that's the price of going beyond Earth. Yes, space is ridiculously expensive. Launching rockets, building satellites, sending probes, it all costs billions. But maybe, just maybe, it's the smartest money we've ever spent. Because space isn't just about cool tech or bragging rights. It's about survival. It's about curiosity. It's about pushing the limits of what's possible. One day we might live on other planets. We might build homes on Mars, mine asteroids, or even find life beyond Earth. And when that day comes, no one will care how many dollars it took to get there. What we'll remember is that we dared to try. Space is expensive, but missing out on what's out there, that might cost us everything. So, what do you think? Should we focus on fixing Earth first, or is it worth investing in the stars? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your take.